Hey everyone, it's Clara. How are you doing? So I realised that recently I've been doing a lot of reviews of smaller games, and that's just because of the way the world is. It's easier for me to get in the smaller games. But got a bigger review this time around: Pandemic Legacy Season Zero. So I have played a fair bit of Pandemic. I have played Pandemic Cthulhu, and I have played seasons 1 and 2 through, and this is the newest one. Pandemic Legacy Season 0 in terms of the legacy games, that is. I realise that there's another Pandemic out that's just come out, World of Warcraft or something. Anyway, so a bigger review, spoiler free. I will do a spoilered one where I just talk about a couple of the things that I enjoyed about it, but I'm not going to go into any in depth with it. But yes, with that, let's just get to the review, shall we? So, did I enjoy Pandemic Legacy Season 0? Yes. If you enjoy Pandemic Legacy, will you enjoy this one? Yes. If you enjoy Pandemic and you're open to the Legacy, will you enjoy this? Yes, it feels very familiar. But I like the way it works. So, this is, I don't think this is any surprise, but rather than necessarily being a pandemic that's spreading, it's more about spies and trying to mop up. Now, I will say that the Cold War theme feels a little bit tired and cliche, and even though it was put into that time frame, I don't know. I this idea that we're still seeing, certain nations and certain countries as enemies is sort of. I realise it's history, and I realise that there is, and there still is, issues with certain countries. But I don't know. It just felt a little bit tired, maybe. But I mean, that is what it is, right? But I did like the fact that, it was interesting this came out during a pandemic, and funnily enough, it wasn't about a pandemic, which was weird. That was kind of fun. In terms of the actual story, I really, really enjoyed the story. It worked through. So, like I say, it felt a bit tired with the tropes. But other than that, like the actual story, it was fun, and you were moving through it. And it sort of felt like you were in that sort of Cold War spy thing. It was all going on. Like the other Pandemic legacies, it's sort of pandemic and then it adds on a little bit extra and a little bit extra and a little bit extra, and it builds it up to a more complex game. I find base Pandemic just a little bit trivial, simple. It doesn't excite me to play it. I will happily play it, but it doesn't excite me. Whereas the legacy games, I like having that extra bit on top of it. I like having that extra little bit more, something else to think about. And so Pandemic Season 0 does that in spades. It does. It adds in these extra little things, different types of puzzles. There's one type of sort of scenario that you do a couple of times that feels. It don't work, in my opinion. I feel like they got it wrong. And I don't know what the solution would be to that, but one of them I'm like, meh. But the others I really enjoyed. I really enjoyed the different types of missions. I also really, really enjoyed the fact that you, season 1, if you played the other legacy games, you know that if you fail a month, the first half of the month, you can play it again in the second half of the month. But this one, instead of you playing the exact same scenario, which feels a bit there, in this one, they're actually like, they change it. They change it between the part 1 and part 2. I thought they were quite generous with the cards as well this time around, in terms of the the help cards, the sort of special cards that you get. But yeah, no, the first half of the month and the second half of the month felt different. There was only a couple, once or twice that we played through twice. Mostly we got it in the first go. It's also sort of interesting that if you complete most of the objectives in the first season, then you still pass it. You don't need to redo it. And I don't know how I feel about that. I feel like we didn't pass this, we didn't do this. So I sort of feel like I wanted to play the second half of the month, get your money's worth type thing. But yeah. Now I know that Legacy Season 2, I think it divided people. I think that a lot of people didn't like it. I loved the idea that you started small on a map and worked outwards and built it up. This feels more like Pandemic or Season 1. Does it have the big spells, the big reveals? You know what? There was two. There was two things. One of them probably should have seen coming, but the um, second one was great. You know, so there was still a couple of surprises. On the third one, they still managed to keep it fresh, keep it new. Like I say, I'm not going to go into it, but I really, really enjoyed it. There's a couple of niggles though. So one of them is that I felt that the rules weren't always clear. With these legacy games, you're introducing rules, and so you've got new things to do. One of them was in the one of them we didn't realize that there was a new thing to do because it was in the flavor text and there wasn't any do this or do that. There wasn't a new rule. And reading it through carefully, you realized what it was telling you to do, but it looked like flavor text, so we completely ignored it. And when we were looking at the solution, we're like, how can there be a second solution? It's only then we figured out what it was trying to do. And that was true a few times. There was rules that were ambiguous, that weren't fully clear, and that's really annoying. You can't do that in a legacy game, because in a legacy game, you get one shot at that game, or maybe two shots. But if you're ambiguous with the new rules, and maybe even make it so that you don't realize there's a new sort of win scenario, like I say, it was in the flavor text and we didn't realize you could do it. That's a problem. That's a problem. You've got to be clear. You've got to be absolutely clear. And so that was really annoying. There was 4 or 5 times where we were just like, what are the rules? This isn't clear. This doesn't make sense. What is it trying to do? Why is this, and this? This one, it's a shame. It's the first time I think I've really felt that with these pandemic games, where I thought the rules really needed to be clearer. The second part of it is there's some, if you played the other ones, this is a minor spoiler, but they scratch things on some of these components. And in the previous games, they've worked really, really well. On this one, you just tear the paper. They were an absolute nightmare. How they managed to get something as basic as scratching off, a covering, which is done on scratch cards around the world. They've done it on previous copies of their games. How they managed to get the production so wrong on those scratch, and it's not the most expensive game, but it's not the cheapest game. That was bad. That was bad. They should not have messed that up so badly, but it is what it is. But in terms of the game, like I say, I really enjoyed it. I think it's my favourite of the 3 seasons of Legacy. I really, really enjoyed it. It just felt a little bit different. And I loved the way you switch characters. I'm not going to go into that, but I liked the sort of mechanisms for bringing in different characters and different ways of playing. That felt fresh and new, and it was lovely, actually. I really, really enjoyed that. That was really good. So, brilliant. Like I say, the rules could be slightly clearer. It's a little bit ambiguous in parts. Cold War, maybe it feels tired, maybe it doesn't. That's up to you. But yeah, some issues with the build quality, shall we say. But in terms of a game, highly recommended. If you like Pandemic and you're willing to add a bit more, you'll love this. If you like the other Pandemic legacies, I think you're going to love this. Highly recommended. I'm Clara. Till next time, take care and bye-bye. Bye!